there's unlimited money out there if you really have something great. I think healthcare is a great one. So if you think about it, I mean, healthcare it's about 20% of the economy and growing.
Rahmel and I talk a lot about supply chains that matter. That's one of those supply chains that matter.
Using AI to be able to solve problems where you've got lots of data that you can process quickly to make better decisions. I mean, that's just one example of the myriad places that you can do things.
I do think that so much that AI can do will just become commonplace, that it won't be like, oh my goodness, is it AI? It's just going to be, this is the way that we live our lives and this is the way we do business.
I mean, the way I think about it, you look for markets that are large, growing, fragmented, where there's a lot of pain, and that tells you where there's an opportunity to try to solve something.
All right, guys, just want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors and our longtime partners, OTR Solutions. Listen, if you need factoring or you're in a current factoring relationship and you're not, having the best experience, I implore you to go check out OTR Solutions. They are the #1 factoring company in the country. They are the only factoring company that offers true non-recourse factoring, which means that, they'll make sure that they take care of everything that you need, your cash flow and so forth, and you don't have to have any headaches or worry about anything else. All right, they're going to take care of it for you. Go check out OTR Solutions now. Click the link below in the bio, or you can text OTRTNH to 80483. That's OTRTNH to 80483, and that'll help you skip the line to get directly with one of our sales reps. All right, guys, let's get back to the show. All right, Hustle fam. We are back with another amazing episode. And today I have a special episode. Two very good friends of the show. I have returning Mr. Benjamin Gordon. He is a managing partner at Cambridge Capital. He throws one of the most amazing conferences in the industry, does a ton of investing in supply chain tech. And man, he's just an amazing guy. So Ben, welcome to the show. And we have our resident supply chain expert, Dyci Sfregola, in the building. So listen, Ben, this is the second time we're doing this, so welcome back. I thought it would be really cool to mix it up a little bit to bring Dyci along as well, because Dyci has forgotten much more than I've ever learned in supply chain. So when it comes to talking that supply chain talk, man, she's the one. So I figured it'll be cool to have you guys kind of nerd out a bit. So Ben, just kind of getting started, man, what is new in your world? I know you have a bunch of things coming up. I know you've made some, recent investments in some businesses. Just give us an overall idea what's new in your world.
Sure. Well, great to see you. And Dyci, looking forward to a fun discussion, and thank you. What's new? So, well, number one, we made an investment about 3 months ago in a new platform, a company called Stat Recovery Services. And, supply chain has all kinds of interesting niches, and I'm continuing to learn about new areas that I didn't actually know were as big as they are. One of them is this field of recovery services. So it turns out that if you are a brand and you do business with Walmart or Target or Kroger, Home Depot, any of the big retailers, you get exposed to all kinds of chargebacks. If you don't deliver on time and in full, for example, you get an OTIF fee, but that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the fees that you can get. And sometimes they're justified, sometimes they're not justified. And so there's kind of an arms race where the brands want somebody to help audit the bills and figure out what's legit and what isn't. Then the retailers, of course, have someone on the other side doing that. And it turns out that Stat is the best in terms of helping brands on the recovery side. They've done an amazing job. Their founder, Casey's built a terrific company, market leader. They're based in Bentonville, so as you would expect, they do a lot with Walmart and the brands that do business with Walmart, but have expanded to others as well. And what was interesting about that was, number one, they're solving a real problem. I mean, there are over $2 billion of chargebacks, for example, just with Walmart, and then figure how much bigger is that across the whole industry. I mean, you're talking over $10 billion. So it's a big problem. And then number two, every brand that does business with major retailers has this as a pain point. And if you can help them, whether it's through the recoveries, or through process automation, post-audit, pre-audit, there are a whole series of services that you can help with. And so that's pretty significant. And then interestingly, one of their competitors, although it's not really a head-to-head competitor, they're smaller, and their scope is more limited. But there's a company called Supply Pike that just sold to SPS Commerce about a month ago. And so it's always good to have validation that there are other people paying, large revenue multiples for something that you're building, and you know that there's demand out there. And so that's
I
interesting.
love a validated business model.
That's right. Exactly.
I love okay, I'm not crazy. Somebody else is doing this. We're going to put our tweak to it, but it's not a, complete out of left field, idea here.
Exactly. You always wonder if are you buying your own bullshit or not, and it's great to know.
For sure.
It's so funny that you say that, because I just wrote a book and I'm in this transition of let me see who I know that will actually allow me to start to implement some of these frameworks, because maybe it's all bullshit. Maybe this is just stuff that I'm making up in my mind. Of course, it's based in some sort of experience. In fact, that doesn't mean that it's gonna work out in practice. So yes, it's great to be aware of your own bullshit meter.
That's right. And by the way, I mean, I've been a founder 5 times, and we've invested in 10 portfolio companies. In most cases, backing founders. Every founder has some level of bullshit, but because, by the way, I mean, when you start a company, you're inventing something that doesn't exist. So you have to believe in something in advance of its reality, or else who would ever start anything? But on the other hand, you have to have self-awareness, and I think it's the balance between those two that characterizes the best one. So anyhow, that's certainly what we strive to do.
For sure. Hey, do you know the origin story of that business, Ben, Stat? Because it's very interesting. How'd they get into that niche? Because it's such a very niche business.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if there were some CPG startup, team that got into Target or Walmart and then didn't actually see any profit for months, because they kept getting these checks that was chargeback. This is a very common problem with a lot of the startup brands who say, I have a great idea, but I don't understand the operations and supply chain of it, but I want to be in big box retail. And they get in big box retail, they get in the distributors, and I made so much money. How did I make no money? And chargebacks are a really big problem for that.
Yeah.
So that's a good question, Rahmel. I'm interested to know if they came from CPG land.
It's a great question. A lot of times founders start with a problem like that they go and solve. Sometimes, though, they come from the other side. And that's what happened here. So Casey, the founder, actually had an accounting background and worked at Walmart. And so he was on the Walmart side looking at all the chargebacks. And then it occurred to him, he said, I could create a lot of value for these brands, helping them navigate the Byzantine structure and all the rules that exist at Walmart. And so his initial thought was, hey, I could go create enterprise value by helping companies solve the problems of navigating a big organization. And then he figured out, hey, if it's true here, it's probably true at every other major retailer. And indeed, that was the case. And one last thing that I'll mention: when you're somebody working at a big company, and Walmart's just one example, but Walmart's total revenue is, it's a crazy number. It's what is it, over $1 trillion now?
I was gonna say, isn't it close to $500 billion or something like that? I feel like, Rahmel, you were telling me that the last time we talked.
Maybe.
I was talking to somebody, and then we sat down and we did, because they specifically asked me, what's Walmart's revenue? And I was like, I'm going to shoot high and go for 200 billion. And they were like, no. They were like, not at all.
Ben looks like he's pulling it up right now.
Guess what? You got it right. 648 billion.
Yeah.
So DC, DC for the win. That's spot on. But you work at one of these huge companies and you control massive spend, but meanwhile, you're a cog in the wheel, and so you're making whatever you make it when it. But if you're making $100,000, $200,000, at a $600 billion company, but there are decisions that you're making that affect hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue for companies. If you understand what the problem is and how to unlock it and improve it, you can create tremendous value, right? Casey's built a business that we'll see, but over the next 5 years, I would predict is going to be worth several $100 million by virtue of figuring it out. So we love looking for people that are directly impacting a problem and they understand how to solve it. And Casey was a great example of that. Who would know better than the guy inside Walmart how to navigate Walmart and take it to scale?
Business owners are used to wearing many hats, but accountant should not be one of them. Receipts, payroll, taxes, 1099s, insurance, bookkeeping, it's time to get your back office off your back. You can consolidate your financial operations into one flat monthly plan that takes care of all of your accounting, payroll, and tax needs. Meet TRANSPOCFO, powered by VENNING, a full-service CPA and business advisor, helping companies like yours save time, money, and headaches. Hate math? We love it and have been doing this since 1978. We manage your entire financial operating system and provide you with a single point of contact, saving you time and money so you can get out of the back office and back to business.
Yeah.
Question, Ben. I don't think I'm supposed to ask questions. I think
No, you're absolutely supposed to ask questions. Go ahead, DC.
question. And this is something that I've posted on LinkedIn. I have, kind of asked my internal circle, and it's a real question. It's not a dig. It's not throwing shade. It's a legitimate question. During COVID, supply chain tech became very sexy. A lot of VCs and investors who actually have no idea what the supply chain landscape is like and why we have all these disparate systems and why it's not easy and why it's not streamlined. They came out, they started investing in these tools. These tools were created. And I mean, the number of messages of like, hey, you're an expert in this space. Can we talk to you about this new tool? Before I got super busy, it was still COVID. I was, the beginnings of COVID, I was very open to having these conversations. And then it was just conversation after conversation of, we've solved the end-to-end supply chain problem. Or, I say, well, what what is the end-to-end supply chain problem? Visibility. Cool. So you're just parroting, more buzzwords. Or we have an API. Well, what does it do? Well, it's an API. Well, what problem is it solving? At one point, it's 2024. So COVID, this was still happening 2021, maybe into 2022. At what point do the players who are actually solving problems like start to emerge and kind of rise above all of the noise of these other players that probably in any other, business environment wouldn't have gotten, anybody's ear to even talk about this thing. They're basically just repackaged tools of stuff we already have in the industry, and the tool isn't the problem. You know what I mean? So coming up with something else isn't going to solve it. When will we start to see, okay, these are the people who were like really solving problems, and then everything else will just start to wean off?
Well, it's a great question. And so many companies got funded, especially in that COVID bubble. 21 probably, peak, based on a story, based on hype. And by the way, I remember what it was like in 99, because that's when I started my first company. And that was also a period, one of those bubbles where if people told a good story, whether they had the actual substance or not, they could raise money. I mean, like the most insane example of this is I remember meeting with investment banker. So the company that I'd first started was Threeplex. It was a SaaS TMS back in the day, 25 years ago. And nobody used the words, SaaS back then, but, and I remember talking to an investment banker and he said, well, tell me your story. And I said, well, my grandfather started a truck leasing company and his grandfather started a horse and buggy company. And he said, Ben, I could take you public just on that story. Well, that's insane. Like that makes no, you don't know anything about what do I do? What problem am I solving? Right. So like there are these weird moments in time when I think the irrational exuberance kind of takes over. So 99 was one of those times. 21, COVID was one of those times. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to look for, and I'm sure you have as well. You have a bullshit meter, right? And you look for people that are solving real problems. And okay, maybe they don't fit the kind of the conventional wisdom Silicon Valley stereotype. But let me give you an example. So greenscreens.ai. It's AI for predictive pricing and trucking. Yeah, I don't know if you know. Well, Refashion Ventures invested in them
Yes.
with me. You know them.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Brian and Melissa
And Lisa.
are.
So real quick, Ben, Brian connected me with DC. That's how I met
excellent.
DC.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The 6 degrees of Brian. Yeah.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah. Well, he's great. So I'm happy to hear that. But we saw this company, Green Screens, and great technology, but there were just a few things that didn't fit the conventional narrative. The conventional narrative, it's like the Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg story. You go to Harvard, you drop out, you have a great idea, you start a business, you move to Silicon Valley, you're all in.
You go to somebody's garage. Yeah.
Right. And it sounds great. And I think one of the things that happens in Silicon Valley is you see something that works and you go, I got to do exactly that. So now you have all these people that look like that same profile and that same story. Green Screens was wildly different. Okay, first of all, in the beginning, it was a brilliant founder and a great tech team, but nobody that really understood the industry. I got involved early, which is unusual. We don't usually get involved this early, and we ended up interviewing a lot of CEOs that looked like that central casting story. And we picked somebody totally different. We picked a woman named Dawn Salvucci Favier. And Dawn hadn't been a CEO before, hadn't been in an early stage startup, didn't live in Silicon Valley, wasn't one of those, hype people that
it was the antithesis to
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, the antithesis. But what she was somebody who is smart, down to earth, knew the business really well. She'd run product management for 3G TMS, which in my experience is one of the best training grounds for CEOs, because someone who's doing product management, you got to be able to talk to everybody. You got to talk to engineering, sales, marketing, and then pull it all together. And guess what? That's pretty good training for what a CEO does. And so Dawn ended up coming on board first to run product management and then to become CEO. Every VC that we talked to in the first, year passed. They said, this isn't for us. It doesn't make sense for all the reasons that we're talking about right now. But guess what? Dawn was 10 times better as a CEO than I would say any of those other kind of stereotypical profiles, including, DC, the examples that you described of those people that were hyping up a story, or we solve visibility when they're not actually solving anything. And in the case of Green Screens, it was solving one very small, precise thing that was a big problem. The problem was pricing. What does it cost? What should it cost to ship a truckload of freight from wherever, Atlanta to New York? And Green Screens uses AI to tell you on a real-time basis, on a predictive basis, today, at this moment, at 11:54, what should it be? And that's actually a big deal if you're a truck broker, shipper, or carrier. And it turns out that that's worth a tremendous amount of money to those companies. So Dawn did a great job of being laser focused on that. Business ramped up. It's now the market leader in that realm. And so, DC, this is a long answer to your question. But
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's better than my prediction is 4 years by 2028. Because I forget. I think Rahmel, we were also talking. I was like, the people who say by 2025, by 2050,
right.
They take themselves seriously. Like, are you an oracle? Like, do you see the future? Like, there's so many variables that can change. So I appreciate this answer much more than like, I give it 5 years. Like, you never know.
Yeah. So to me, what it comes down to is those people are out there. It's up to us to find the people that are real
and,
people
and,
solving real
and
problems.
amplify those stories and amplify
Exactly.
those voices. And I don't know how much you can share. I know from my experience with some tools, when there's a proprietary algorithm, it's their algorithm. But I used to work in the airline at Delta. I also spent a little stint in residential, like multifamily leasing. So I know there are pricing tools that are based off of like market demand and competitor data and what I think, like what the system thinks the best price will be, to your point, like right now in this moment for this person from this IP address in this area. Is it similar technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, you worked at Delta. I mean, the airlines have been doing predictive pricing for a long time.
Mhm.
Trucking has not. Why is that? I mean, for I think a variety of reasons. Number one, I think the airline industry, you have a small number of big companies, so they have more of an incentive to do it. Trucking is a lot more fragmented. So if you're a smaller company, are you going to go spend 20, 30, 40 million to try to solve this on your own? I mean, there are a variety of reasons, but yes, it is very much like the dynamic pricing that you see in the airline industry, where hey, if there's more demand, if this flight's going to be oversold, they can charge more, as you would expect. And on the other hand, if it's a Christmas Day flight and fewer people are traveling, and rates adjust accordingly. I mean, it's using supply and demand signals to modify price.
Got it. All right. Well, talking about solving real problems, where are some supply chains where you see the most inefficiencies? I know you're always looking at different types of supply chains. Give me some examples of some supply chains where you see some inefficiencies that are ripe for disruption, or, ripe for somebody to come in and solve some problems.
Well, I think healthcare is a great one. So if you think about it, I mean, healthcare it's about 20% of the economy. And growing, and nobody has a great experience with the hospital process or the pharmacy process or the medical supply chain, right? I mean, because you got high stakes, and if there's a delay, and the consequences can be steep, life and death in some cases, or you get the wrong thing at the wrong time. I mean, there's so many things that can and do go wrong in the healthcare supply chain. So, I mean, the way I think about it, you look for markets that are large, growing, fragmented, where there's a lot of pain, and that tells you where there's an opportunity to try to solve something. So, healthcare supply chain is super interesting to me. We don't currently have a platform company in that arena. We'd love to find one. Some of the areas that I think are really interesting, one is inbound logistics for hospitals. So to take an example, hospitals, despite the fact that everybody feels overcharged, most of them don't make money for a variety of reasons. But one consequence is inventory. You really want to have the right inventory at the right time, not too much, not too little. And so imagine that if you're going in for surgery, well, what's the consequence if they have run out of something, and what do they do? Reschedule you for the next day? I mean, it's high enough stakes that it's not worth it to them to have stockouts. But on the other hand, you have too much inventory, there's a carrying cost associated with that. So one interesting area, I think, are companies that have Kanban systems, the idea of kind of consistent replenishment of the right amount at the right time. Another area that's interesting is compliance, the compliance supply chain for pharmaceuticals. In other words, I have certain diseases or disabilities and I take certain pills, and pharmacies want to know, am I taking the right amount or not? If I'm not, that's called non-compliance. Is there a way to track that? And is there a way to analyze that, and the kind of the supply chain around that? Another interesting area is the shift from hospitals to homes. For example, I mean, hopefully you don't have any weird, rare diseases. I happen to have one that involves low immunoglobulin levels, and it basically means you get sick all the time. And the solution for it is there's a product that's basically that temporarily boosts your immunoglobulin levels. It used to be that you'd have to go to the hospital and get an IV infusion for that, which is pretty unpleasant. Now you can do these at home, and there are companies like CVS that will do home healthcare shipments. that's just one microcosm of what's happening in the world of healthcare, because hospitals and insurance companies realize it's a lot cheaper to treat people at home than to make them go to a hospital. So the whole home healthcare supply chain, about delivery, replenishment, if there's a problem, reverse logistics, that's a pretty interesting area. So, those are just three examples, but I think there's tons of opportunity in the healthcare supply chain. And I'm curious, if either of you have seen interesting companies in that arena, because I think there's lots of.
I have experienced all of those things. I don't know of any new platform. So just when you said healthcare, I was like, yes, because my first thought, and very selfishly, because like this is my latest thing. My mom always says I get on something like white on rice. With a Southern accent, because she was born and raised in Alabama. But I've been focused a lot on construction in the built environment, because there's tons of ways, like it's highly inefficient, very similar to like the fragmented truck driver. You've got all these fragmented, decentralized subcontractors that are going under these prime contractors. But when you said healthcare, I remember when my son was 3, he broke his arm, and the process of ER to where's there going to be a hospital to, is it the ambulance? Can we just drive him to sit and wait for hours as a 3-year-old at 2:00 in the morning who can't eat or drink, but he's going to have surgery? I was just like, when I make a lot of money, I'm going to find someone who is solving this problem for a healthcare supply chain and process improvement, because this is ridiculous. And, Rahmel and I talk a lot about supply chains that matter. That's one of those supply chains that matter to like the end consumer, to the patient. That is something that absolutely affects our daily lives in so many ways. I did a tour, was it last year maybe? Piedmont Healthcare in Atlanta, in Georgia, not just in Atlanta. I visited the warehouse in Atlanta, and they were talking to us about the exact inventory problem that you explained. So, doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, they don't care about your inventory carrying costs. They care about, am I going to have the stuff for my surgeries today? Some of these, which are life-threatening, must-happen surgeries. So the healthcare supply chain is very much, the order comes today, it goes out today. It has to happen. That's what's going to happen. So you do get this inventory problem of, we just can't run out. Where, one of my first projects in doing a software implementation was in retail, and that was their, model. We can't run out of stuff. So they just had a whole bunch of inventory. Well, you can go back and say, service level, 96%, the other 4%, if it doesn't happen, you don't care. But in healthcare, that 96% service level needs to be 100%, because 4% could be someone's life. So it is, there is this challenge of also, kind of working with the medical providers to also educate them on like, yes, we want to save people, we want to do good, but do you need all that gauze? Like, do you need all of those? Or like the idea of forecasting and looking at historicals, demand aggregation, that's a new thing to the industry. And also just like the internal model. So Piedmont, what they did was to take, I think the guy that's heading up the transformation was from Walmart. And then someone else came from manufacturing, and then someone else came from like grocery. So they brought a bunch of people from different industries and said, how do we bring all of these different ideas from what we've seen have worked in other industries and bring that to what we need to do here? Some healthcare systems are trying to do this by way of a group purchasing organization. But my experience also in working with like one of the main distributor warehouses that will then send out stuff to all of the hospitals and medical facilities, you just show up to work and you start at 8 and maybe you finish at 8 or maybe you finish at 5, because there's actually no demand forecast that comes in terms of like warehouse planning for the day. It's just very much whatever happens today, and we'll see how it goes. So I see that as being a big opportunity. And some of it is behavior changing in terms of forecasting and working off of like not this gut feeling or this knee-jerk reaction to, oh, we got an order. Didn't know we were going to get an order today. Despite the fact that on this day for the last 5 years, we've gotten this many. Like we could have probably come up with a range of what we would expect. But I see that as a big opportunity, just like that demand forecasting piece to help plan with inventory and orders. And then just coming up with some sort of like ordering policy, things like that. So it is definitely multifactorial in that it's not just a platform that's going to solve it. There are going to have to be paradigm shifts in the way we look at inventory. Because yeah, to your point, while some hospitals and healthcare systems are not for profit, like you still need money to function. Not for profit doesn't mean that like there's no money. It just means that there's no like shareholders making a lot of money off of the profit, but a business still needs money to run. And the best emergency room I've ever been to was always so wonderful because it was only me, my husband, and my son, and like maybe one other person. And ultimately, they went out of business. And we don't have that wonderful system. I mean, I thought they had great systems. I thought that everything ran smoothly. Again, it could have just been that nobody was there. So, of course, it's going to run smoothly. But you do have to make money or you go out of business. So that's a very long-winded way of saying, yes, I've experienced many of these things. One of the other, I actually caught up yesterday with a gentleman that is heading up supply chain transformation for data center construction at Microsoft. And we're in a circular supply chain. It's a network of people who volunteer their time to talk about these things because we're so passionate about it. And it sounds so nerdy when I say it out loud. Like, no one's paying us. We just like hope this will make the world better. So we meet regularly to talk about it. But he was just catching up. He was actually talking about another problem that he found in healthcare when he was at Accenture. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. With gene therapy, when the patient is the consumer and the supplier. So you have to like take out the blood, the sample, whatever it is, you put it in the CRISPR for like a certain amount of time, and then it has to go back into the patient. So like that's a unique supply chain problem that they were trying to solve. And that was just like one of the things that stood out to him when he was in healthcare. But yeah, tons of opportunity. That's the like I said, when I make a lot of money and I don't care about money and I don't care about anything, that's the first thing I'm doing. Or I'll just talk to Ben and he has the money. And then I'll help him find some good opportunities.
There's more money out there than there are great ideas. So you have a great idea. There's lots of, by the way, I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I learned in, I remember when I started my first company, I remember going through the process of pitching people. There's unlimited money out there if you really have something great. So in all seriousness, we should come up with something great.
For sure. What? So my follow-up question to that is, what problems are too many people trying to solve? What's oversaturated right now?
Well, a couple of years ago, my answer would have been digital truck brokerage. There are all these companies saying, Convoy being an example, I'm going to solve the truck brokerage problem, and I'm going to automate it, and truck brokerage is going away. Well, truck brokerage isn't going away. The Mark Twain line comes to mind. Rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. Well, same holds true for truck brokerage. They're not dead. It's true that the truck brokerage world is changing and technology is changing it, and long run margins will probably go down, and you'll have to be able to do more with less, and there'll be fewer people and more automation. But still, at the end of the day, if you compared what a digital truck broker does with a traditional truck broker, I would challenge you to show me where there's a material difference, right? I mean, like if you looked at what Convoy did and compared it to what Echo or RXO or CH Robinson did, they're both matching freight with capacity, and there's a similar workflow and a similar set of steps. Now, Convoy had the ambition of automating more of it, which, by the way, was a worthy ambition. But it's not like everybody else was standing still. Those companies are all spending money on technology and looking to automate the process as well. So I think one reason why a lot of the digital truck brokers hit the rocks, there were several bankruptcies last year in that realm, was because number one, there were too many of them. And number two, there just wasn't that much of a material difference between what they did and what the so-called analog or traditional truck brokers were doing. And then one last thing that I want to add to that, which is there were also a lot of companies that managed to raise money during COVID as tech-enabled services companies, but they managed to find investors that valued them like they were software companies. So, which is great, by the way. I mean, it's sort of like the Bitcoin of logistics, right? I mean, you're creating something out of nothing. It's great.
Right.
But the problem, of course, is, in the end, if you're a tech-enabled services company, in the long run, I believe, you rise and fall based on your profit generation. And when it comes time to selling, you're going to sell based on an EBITDA multiple. Maybe you get a higher EBITDA multiple because you got more technology, more growth, and more differentiation. But, are you going to get 20 times revenue for that? No, you're not. But there were companies that raised money at these kinds of stratospheric valuations. What did that do? I mean, just you think about the incentives. If I knew that I could go start a tech-enabled services company and raise money at 20 times revenue in 2021, gee, that sounds like a good idea. So what happened? A lot of people did it. So as a result, you had a lot of people doing something that didn't really make economic sense because temporarily the financial markets rewarded it. Then you had too many people doing it. Market was too crowded, not enough differentiation, and a bunch of them failed. Didn't mean that there wasn't innovation, there wasn't value, there weren't smart people doing interesting things, but it did mean that the category was overfunded and a lot of the companies didn't really have a reason to exist based on having something materially different. So I don't want to see the baby thrown out with the bathwater. There's a lot of great innovation. By the way, Convoy created lots of great innovation. I mean, there were a lot of people in the industry that had snide things to say about Convoy's demise, last fall, and you can look them up on LinkedIn and Twitter. X,
Twitter.
But guess what? We all benefited from that. The increased technology and adoption was good for the industry. So, and so as a result, some of the innovation that came out of that, it'll end up getting reconfigured elsewhere. Some of the people that worked at Convoy, I have no doubt, will go on to build great companies in other areas of supply chain tech. So category was overfunded. A lot of companies didn't make sense, but a lot of good comes out of it too.
Yeah. What about what's your opinion on how could I describe it? And I was trying to actually listen to you and not wait for my turn to talk, so I didn't gather my thoughts. But so last mile delivery is what's coming to mind, but it's not last mile. It's grocery delivery. So Instacart dominated, but then Kroger did their own thing, Walmart did their own thing. I started to see a couple of little tools pop up that were all solving the same problem. And I felt like that was becoming oversaturated, the last mile delivery, and then the Instacart style of if you order something from the liquor store, you'll get it in an hour. If you order something from the grocery store, you'll get it in an hour. And there were a couple of tools that I was talking and I stopped following it, but back in 21, and I was like, guys, how is this different from Instacart? Or wasn't there one that was called Go Puff? Or maybe there's still one that's called
Go Puff. They're out of Philadelphia, actually. Yep.
Yeah. So I felt like that space was becoming overcrowded for a little bit, and then I stopped following it.
Yeah. I mean, so Go Puff, I think Getir, which was a Turkish one. I mean, there were a handful of others, and cumulatively, I mean, there were, I think, a couple $1 billion of of capital invested in during COVID in those 10-minute delivery, 15-minute delivery models. And to me, it seemed insane. I mean, are you really going to pay a premium for 10-minute delivery versus whatever? I mean, an hour or two, like how many things do you really need in 10 minutes? We're not talking about healthcare. This isn't like surgery.
Because if you're dying and you need it, you should call 911,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But if we're talking alcohol, if you need alcohol in 10 minutes, maybe you got other problems. So I don't know.
For sure.
That whole category seemed crazy, and not surprisingly, it's gone through quite a compression in the last 2 years. So some of the companies that you mentioned, GoPuff, Gettier, and others, they've gone through massive layoffs, and in the end, I think that will consolidate. I mean, it makes sense that there's an Instacart. It makes sense that maybe there should be another couple of companies, but how many Instacart-like companies should there be in the end? Kind of like in the parcel arena. I mean, there's a reason why we basically have a duopoly today, UPS and FedEx. Does it make sense to have the massive capital expenditure to recreate all that infrastructure? Probably not. So look, in the long run, DC, I'm gonna do exactly what you said not to do. In 5 years, I'm gonna give a prediction. By the way, 5-year predictions are great because nobody will ever hold you accountable for them.
That's right.
But you can record this and save it and see if I'm right in 2029. In 5 years, I think it'll be Instacart and one or two other companies. You're not going to have all these other people competing for 10-minute delivery of grocery. But, maybe Uber Eats, survives, maybe one or two others. And I think that should be it.
Ben, from your view, what's the most important thing happening in M&A right now that will have the largest impact in the next 10, 20 years? I know that's a long view.
It doesn't matter because the 5 years doesn't matter in general.
I'm saying, like, what do you see happening right now? Whether it's some consolidation, whether it's a acquisition, a merger, that you can say, that you can guess and say, what, this right here is going to have such an impact. We need to really focus on this.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, if you'd asked me this question 10 years ago, I probably would have said at the time XPO. And the reason was Brad Jacobs, and you may have seen Brad he's spoken at our conference. We've been involved with him. He's great. We were involved with him in the beginning and co-invested with him at XPO. Brad's one of those guys with big ideas. And then the ability, actually, DC, it comes back to your point about you have a great idea. There's plenty of money available. Brad raised, I think, $6 billion over the course of building XPO. But he created a $20 billion company. So, I mean, it was obviously very successful. If you were lucky enough to it wasn't WeWork, no.
It was also a tech company, but it was just real estate.
Well, WeWork was like sprinkling pixie dust on real estate and calling it, some sort of community building technology company. I mean, that was really like the essence of the bullshit conversation that we were having at the beginning of this, right? But XPO, right? Like Brad was buying companies in truck brokerage, doing a roll-up, making them incrementally better through a combination of some operational improvement, a lot of marketing, and just creating a more complete network. And what Brad did that was so powerful was he took a large, growing, fragmented market, truck brokerage, and he consolidated a big chunk of it. And he built $20 billion business as a result. So really the question now is, where is there an opportunity to create that kind of transformational change today? And I think there are a couple of possible areas. One, by the way, is look at what Brad's doing next.
RXO.
RXO.
QX, right? Yeah, RXO, right? Yeah.
QXO is the new one. RXO is the truck brokerage. Yeah.
Right. That's right. Yep. QXO.
So that's a roll up in concept, much like XPO was in concept in 2011 in the building products distribution arena. So I think you'll see him buy a string of companies and build something. I mean, he's raised a lot more money than he did with XPO. So his ambitions are much bigger. And so like that has the potential to be, look, I mean, if Brad in the beginning raised around $75 million or so to buy Express One, which became the platform for building a $20 billion company. And this time, he's raised multiples of that. He's expecting to build multiples of a $20 billion company, 50 billion, 100 billion. Let's see. So clearly that's one to watch. Then secondly, I would say there's still a consolidation story in other areas of the logistics and supply chain world. Warehousing and fulfillment, for example. Lots of regional players in warehousing and fulfillment. What's great about that as an industry is it's sticky, right? They have your inventory. So you're less likely to switch from one provider to the next from day to day, like you could in truck brokerage, because it's just more difficult.
To switch, man.
Yeah, it's a pain.
Even just from the data, the back end, what do you call the product? What do I call the product? What's the new warehouse or 3PL going to call the product? And when do we transition it? But where do you tell customers to make the order? It's a nightmare that you definitely, I will move houses a lot, but not warehouses. not warehouses.
Well, so that illustrates the point, right? So who's vying to be a consolidator in warehousing? Well, GXO, which spun out of XPO, is one. And I think they're poised to do great things. Now, full disclosure, because I was an original investor in XPO, I'm still an investor in GXO, RXO, and XPO. And so I don't want to be accused of selling my book. But,
how to make a few $1 billion?
Well, I think but I think that GXO is poised for continued growth and success, and I think intends to be a consolidator in that. But they're not the only one. There are other interesting players too. There are some overseas companies coming in. Dyci Group, which is a French company, consolidating in Europe and now coming into the U.S. In the e-commerce fulfillment and warehousing arena. Then on the tech side, you've got tech companies that figured out that if you were going to be great at e-commerce fulfillment software, you had to have the services and the capabilities. So companies like, Fulfilled grew aggressively before their sale to Flexport. Stored, just bought the Ingram Micro, the Pitney Bowes e-commerce fulfillment business. Cart.com has made multiple acquisitions. So a lot of these tech-enabled e-com fulfillment companies will compete to grow in that arena. So look, in the end, I think consolidation in warehousing and fulfillment will be one of the big themes of this decade. What do you think?
I love that. I agree with you, Ben. I think you just nailed it. That was perfect. DC, you have anything to add?
No.
Or did Ben knock it out the park?
No,
you left us speechless, Ben.
Yes, which doesn't happen often. I'm actually speechless because I'm processing and I'm like, do I agree with that? Do I think that there's anything else to add? But from my experience in working with distributors and 3PLs, which I've done a lot of through medical devices, and then wine and spirits, and there is definitely the opportunity for consolidation. I don't know how. I'm cautiously optimistic, and I'm cautious because I have seen the systems. So my perspective of everything is very much okay, but now where do we put automation into that? Where do we put systems into that? Where do we put data into that? And even if you think about household names in wine and spirits distribution that have national distribution, and that's where you want your product to be because it's going to get to all states. They grew by way of M&A, but they still very much operate as many different companies. So from the shipper perspective, from the customer perspective, there hasn't actually been any additional value added because, I have a sales team that still talks to every different state as if they're different companies. The people from those states just happen to have the same email addresses from, the same domain, the same company, but the product is all, a different item. I've done projects of item mapping for what we call this item and for what the distributor calls this item in every single different state. It's like, dude, it's the same distributor. Why is the item something different in every state? Why are you doing something different? And it's because that M&A strategy happened on the front end, but not on the back end. So it didn't actually, it's not providing any real value to the industry right now. There's a solution for that though. The solution is you fix it. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh my goodness, but what could we do? We could never, make this better. No, you just don't do that. You do it, the other way, to where you do take the time, and you make that part of the, I think you said, you buy it and then you make it incrementally better. And that's part of making it incrementally better, is improving systems, better data governance, streamlining processes across all of the different warehouse and fulfillment areas, and not just continuing to function as fragmented warehouses that happen to all have the same company name.
Well, I think one thing's clear. When you said I left you speechless, I think we can both agree that wasn't true.
Oh man, let me tell you something about DC, Ben. She's never speechless. That's one thing. She doesn't know how to be speechless. That's for sure. All right, cool. So my last question for you, Ben, would be around like AI, right? Every company that's being started right now is some form of AI, right? AI. Is there a world where like there's like an anti-AI world where we go back and say, you know what, we don't want AI anymore. We want some sort of like, how far does this AI thing go? And when does the AI bubble burst?
And if I can add on to that for you to also share your insights, is that I've seen in the VC space, people literally say, we only want to invest in AI. So now what that means is that tools that actually aren't AI driven are saying we do AI, or they're putting AI in the name. And it's like, that's just statistical forecasting, guys. Like that's not AI. So to Rahmel's question, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, is the market driving it, or is the investors driving it? And, what's that cycle going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, there's no doubt there are excesses. I mean, it reminds me of peak blockchain, craze, when I remember it was like the Long Island iced tea company, I think, that rebranded as, they rebranded as the Long Island Blockchain Company. And the stock price went up like 20x. I was like, it's the same company. What the hell? So clearly, I mean, there are some excesses, but fundamentally, the technological breakthroughs that AI allows really are amazing. And I mean, there are the hype cases like ChatGPT and the various things that you can do. But I see it firsthand with green screens, where green screens is using AI, is using machine learning to be able to do a much better job of predicting what a price should be in an industry where there was high volatility, and the cost of that volatility was significant. Because, I mean, think of it like this. If you're a truck broker and you call customer, and you call Walmart, whomever, and say, all right, I'd like to book a truckload of freight going from Bentonville to Atlanta, and they say, well, I'll pick a number, $5,000. Is that a good price or a bad price? Normally, that truck broker would look at the historical data. So they'd go to someone like DAT that would tell you maybe what the price was last month, or a trailing average. But there's so much volatility in the market. Think of it as if like you wanted to buy shares in Google, and you called the stockbroker, and the stockbroker said, no problem, DC, I'm going to give you the average price for July. You're like, well, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? And so it just doesn't make any sense. So look, using AI to be able to solve problems where you've got lots of data that you can process quickly to make better decisions. I mean, that's just one example of the myriad places that you can do things. So I know there are lots of VCs that say, "Oh, we'll only invest in things that are AI and AI related," and it sounds dogmatic to me. But on the other hand, I get it because there's so much power and there's so much that hasn't happened yet that we're just in the early innings of, much in the same way that the internet was in the 90s. And you know, if you heard somebody in the 90s say, "Well, we're only going to invest in companies that are in the internet," at the time that also sounded crazy. But now it's woven into everything that we do, right? So I think the art is, can you visualize what the future could look like in the next 3 to 5 years, and then figure out how the technology can help you get there faster? And AI absolutely is a huge part of that. So again, bring it back to the concrete areas in logistics and supply chain. There's so much data rich opportunity in the supply chain world that if you can use
and just
AI,
repetitive processes of people
yeah,
doing the same. Where is my freight? Where is this? Where is that? Yeah.
exactly. So whether it's tracking or customer communication, just like drafting, I mean, you see this in little microcosms, like using Gmail, where Gmail will prompt with a response for your, for your message. Well, imagine if you had those prompts as a customer service or an ops or a tracking person in the truck brokerage arena, but you could just very quickly automate 90% of the communication that you would have with a customer, and how much time would that save, and how many more customers could you serve? So there's all kinds of practical opportunity to use all that data. So yeah, it's definitely overhyped, but also for good reason. And I think there are amazing opportunities in that arena. And I think, like green screens as an example, I mean, we're absolutely investing in companies that are using it, but not just using it as a source of hype, but as a real way to deliver business value. It's out there, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny that you mentioned the internet, because I was thinking there that I had two examples. I said, okay, well, I could use the internet example, or I could use the COVID example. And then you use the internet example. COVID still seems like not great, just like maybe not PC, but like it's not COVID anymore. It's like you just get the flu, like you get sick. You know what I mean? It's not like shut down, et cetera, et cetera. So in the same way, I completely agree. I see the power of AI not in this dystopian, the bots are going to take over, because the bots won't have enough data to actually make anything of it. Then contextually, to know that what they're doing and like improve upon it. I don't see that happening in my lifetime. But in this utopian perspective of all the power that we can, the value that we can achieve from powerful AI. On the other side, I'm still very much a tree hugger. And, I follow a lot of the energy supply chain, data centers, like everything that we're also using to drive these AI models. But I do think that so much that AI can do will just become commonplace, that it won't be like, oh my goodness, is it AI? It's just going to be, this is the way that we live our lives, and this is the way we do business. And the technology is there. It's not like, oh, we have to create something. There are several good companies. I mean, I personally, and I have a couple of friends at Amazon, so I'm pretty sure like all of their systems are pretty much like they built them in house. I had that customer service experience with tracking, and I did not talk to her. It was a bot, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best bot that like I've talked to ever. And I was blown away. And I said, like this is where we're going, and this is where it's not where the technology is going because it's here. It's just we have to now see it at scale to where all companies, even small companies, are implementing these sorts of systems, not just the Amazons of the world. Now, how long will that take? It's like I remember flat screens used to be like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Now you can get them for a couple $100. So as it becomes more common, the price, barrier to entry for price will start to reduce, and then we'll start to see more of it. But I do think that the AI hype is here to stay, but it might not be so in your face. in X number of years. Like I remember when I first started in the industry, control towers and visibility, control towers were all the rage. It was everything about control towers. And now no one really uses that term anymore, but we're still doing it. Like we're still doing exception-based planning. People are still getting alerts. It's just not this like, you need a control tower. That's where we'll start to see that turn. And I mean, I advise a company called Inventory, and they're working on the procurement side, and it's real AI. And it was one of those conversations to where I have so many of those, but what are you doing? What problem are you solving conversations? And when I talked to Pooja and I saw the tool, I was like, no, like this one is a game changer. Like it was one of those like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Like it's so like it's the document management. It's exactly, where's my stuff? I was expecting the ASN. I didn't get the ASN. Can you update the system? Like the normal way is, as a person, I pick up, I look in the ERP. If I have an ERP, I try to find it. If I don't, then I go back and update it, blah, blah, blah. To have an AI bot do all of that, compose the email, first of all, give me the notification to say like, this hasn't happened yet. And, or look at this thing happening in the world with your other supplier. This is probably going to affect this shipment. It's probably going to affect this manufacturing production, or it's probably going to affect this. Why don't you take a look at it? It's like, I mean, I can only put so many Google alerts in my email and hope that it gets caught. So to have AI as my assistant doing that for me, and then having the bot write the email, copy me on it, update the system. And this can be a text message. It can be in Slack. It can be like just easy DocuSign, click or reply. Like, why didn't I think of that? Like I hated doing that, like hated doing that. How didn't I think of that? Like, it's so simple. But yeah, I mean, I talk to, just being in this space. I have a friend and he's always like, I have this thing, but I got to get it to market because the tech is out there. There's so many people around the world, if we get out of our like US bubble, just around the world, they're doing all of these cool things. So we'll start to see it just permeate industry more, and it'll become a second thought. No one's going to say, oh, the AI. It's just like, oh yeah, that's my bot. My bot does that, or the AI does that. I could be like, who's this on the call with us?
The Otter AI. But the thing about that stands out to me is the winners are usually the ones that figure out how to use the new tools first. And that's kind of the big thing that I would highlight about this. Because, I mean, I see this with green screens, right? The truck brokers that started using green screens early got huge productivity gains. So there were a lot of truck brokers that said, oh, I make my decisions based on gut feel, and I know this market better than anybody else. Okay, I mean, maybe.
And the bot's not going to tell me. The computers don't know better than I do. Yeah, we see that all the time.
Exactly. So the ones that adopted, ended up making a lot more money. And I think you see this elsewhere. I mean, look, we have another company. You brought up the circular economy, DC, when you're talking earlier about, whether with data centers or otherwise. Reverse Logics is one of our portfolio companies. And it's software for automating the returns process. Okay, returns, huge deal. There was something like close to 800 billion of returns last year. So it's a huge pain point. It causes major losses for retailers, e-tailers, brands. There's something like,
it's gotten so bad to where sometimes they'll say, just keep it.
Right.
It's not even worth it. Just keep it. It's not worth the headache.
If you buy something for less than $50, the fully loaded supply chain cost to get it back, triage it, go through all the steps, oftentimes it's cheaper for them to do just that, just what you said. But here's the interesting thing. Companies that were early adopters of Reverse Logics, software for automating returns, which really the biggest savings typically come in labor savings from a process handling standpoint. How many steps do you have to go through? How much work has to get done? You're in Atlanta, UPS is legendary for taking process steps out and automating as much as they can. Well, Reverse Logics really figured out how to use software to automate the returns process in a powerful way. So they're helping companies like logistics giants, FedEx, DHL, GXO, saving tens of millions of dollars. But then also major brands, Amer Sports, or Samsonite or others, same thing. And the thing is, it's a complicated process, right? Like you look at it, kind of like we were talking about with inventory and DC, your point that you'd rather move houses than warehouses because inventory is sticky, right? Well, automating a returns process takes time. And so people generally don't just wake up one day and say, all right, it's Tuesday, let's do this and implement it tomorrow. But if you knew that you could save tens of millions of dollars, would you spend a couple of months, and a tiny fraction of that? Of course you would. But the people that have done that, like the companies that I've mentioned, generating huge benefit, still represent a tiny fraction of that total market. So I think, Rahmel, to come back to your AI question, I think the winners are going to be the ones that adopt, whether it's AI or other powerful productivity software like Reverse Logix, faster, knowing that the people that lean in early sometimes have to be, there's usually some sort of catalyst, some sort of burning platform. Customers ask you to do something. Like, it's not just that you're rationally saying, am I better off? There's got to be something that pushes them over the edge. But the companies that do that take those steps, those are the winners. That was true with the internet in the 90s. And I think it's true now with AI and other technologies.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing note to end on. It is always great to talk to both of you guys. Just a wealth of knowledge. I'm just sitting here taking notes and just love it, man. Ben, thank you so much for joining us again. DC, thank you for sitting in as well. We got to do this again soon. I feel like this trio, like we might have something here, guys.
Love it.
For sure. All right, guys, that's gonna end the show. Thank you so much, Ben Gordon, for joining us. Cambridge Capital, Dyci Sfregola. We are out, and we'll talk next time.
Thank you.
All right, guys. If you love Truck and Hustle and you love the interviews and the information that we're providing week to week, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. All right, Hustle fam.